Thankfully, things a little bit quieter out ahead of that into Liberty County right now. Showers, but not really storms. And of course, we're going to just hunker down now and wait for this last round of severe thunderstorms to push through the panhandle over the next 2 to 3 hours. Ryan?
Yeah, that's right, Dan. Yeah, this being the final batch here to get through this morning as it slides its way further off towards the east. And like Dan mentioned, we're seeing several of these little notches that are showing up. That is physically the thunderstorm itself, sucking in the warm, moist air from the inflow in these spots of the thunderstorm and the squall line, feeding the squall line with more warm, moist air to actually get it to continue to produce these gusty winds and thunderstorm activity. And as it sucks itself in, it actually gets wrapped into the storm itself, the squall line. The warm, moist air wraps up into the storm itself and creates rotation right on the front. Now, this is something that happens very briefly in the atmosphere, but it's a very akin to what we see in squall line features, and some of the strongest ones, as they're able to soak up and absorb more warm, moist air to help foster the thunderstorm complex itself. It's a big engine. An engine needs inflow, right? And an engine needs exhaust. And that's what you're watching happen. This thunderstorm complex, any thunderstorm for that matter, acts like an engine. It gets inflow and it produces outflow. And you have updrafts and you have downdrafts in the storm system. And we're watching right on the front edge of this leading batch of gusty winds really have a strong inflow into it just because of the warm, moist air that sits out in front of it. That's a readily available fuel source. That's like gasoline in the engine here for us. Maybe not the same exact mechanics in that regard, but the warm, moist air is the fuel for the storm, because the rising motion that it helps foster is what helps to create the thunderstorm itself. So we have all this warm, moist air coming into the storm system, and it creates these little notches where we get rotation to happen amongst that line of showers and thunderstorms. You've got gusty, then straight line winds that are also embedded in this line of thunderstorms itself as it continues to move its way further off towards the east. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here as we're just about to move this leading batch of showers and thunderstorms right into Bay County, and it looks like a couple of these notches are actually starting to develop right there on the coast. Look at that. 2 inflow notches and 2 potential rotating little embedments into this cell, into this portion, this segment that is of the squall line feature, where each one of these could be producing some brief weak spin. Now, we don't tend to see the strong EF2s like we dealt with those supercell structures that we had already here this morning in the discrete thunderstorms. Those sort of summer cells just sit and thrive in the warm, moist air. The squall line feature is driven more by the cold air rushing into the warm, moist air to push it up. So we've got a different mechanism of creation going on, and this kind of storm structure doesn't tend to lead toward EF1, EF2s. Not that it's out of the question in some of the strongest squall line features, but it tends to produce these brief little weak spin-ups that move along the line. So we're now starting to see it enter into Bay County here on the coastline. Some of those little brief weak spin-ups, and they're going to be a little more likely near the coastline than they will be further inland, because the water acts almost like a frictionless surface to where we can get some good meshing of the winds to occur without any sort of trees or buildings to get into the way at the surface there. So if we're going to get some rotation to happen, it's going to be near the surface. And it looks like folks in Laguna Beach are up next for maybe some very potent winds to move their way on through here, as we've got the leading edge of the squall line coming through, and then you've also got an inflow notch that's happening right there, and that's also the reason why we have a tornado warning on this storm segment as it continues to work its way further towards the east here into Bay County. So Bay County, you're up right now. It's starting to move towards the airport. We're starting to see the leading edge move into Ebro, where you're going to get very gusty, stormy conditions for the next maybe 30 minutes or so, 20 to 30 minutes, as we continue to traverse up Highway 79. We're maybe a little bit further west of Vernon, but we're seeing that leading edge move into Washington County now, and further off towards the north. Ponce de Leon, the worst of it has actually got right past you. Now it's just going to be kind of a little bit of gusty wind still, but just some moderate to steady rains for the next hour or so before the rain comes to an end. Caryville, you're in the mix of it. Very heavy rains, very gusty winds, I'm assured, going on with that as well. And if we continue to go north of Highway 20, Bonifay, you're just starting to get into a good batch of thunderstorms. And for you, it looks like it might last maybe a little bit more than just 30 minutes, maybe a good 45 minutes before it starts to slide out towards the east. But once we get the leading edge of this line past your neighborhood, we'll be done with the severe threat of weather here for the day, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about some of the lines on the winds on the leading edge of that storm, which can be sampled right now from the radar itself down towards Laguna Beach, for example. Nearby, at least, the West End Fire Department camera looking towards the southwest is certainly showing a rapid deterioration of conditions. If you haven't seen the squall line move through just yet, this is a good example of what things are going to look like as it first starts to arrive. The wind's picking up and the rain becoming more intense. It's going to get noisy with with thunder becoming more frequent and nearby. There's so much of it out there. It's likely going to be very close to your location, which is just another reason among a laundry list of reasons we have to stay indoors here as this system pushes on through your area. Thankfully, as Ryan talked about, the southern component of this squall line is going to last for a fairly short duration of time, seeing a little bit of a broadening out of that squall line up towards the northern portion of the Panhandle into northern Washington and Holmes counties, where the rain will at least be a little bit more intense for a significantly longer period of time by comparison, probably 30 or 45 minutes. Out on the leading edge of this line of storms moving through Laguna Beach right now, wind gusts not too far off the surface of 60 to 70 miles per hour. And then again, we're watching this area just to the north of Laguna Beach up towards straight up 79 south of Ebro near Highway 20. If you're familiar with the area, there's an area of rotation right here becoming a little bit better defined than previous radar scans. There you have it right there. And once again, these are all moving at a very high rate of speed. So from where it currently sits on the most recent scan, just to the west of 79, it's not going to be a long period of time before you're seeing this rotation, maybe a funnel cloud or possibly even a tornado crossing over Highway 20 there at a high rate of speed. Embedded within that rotation, this is showing some higher wind speeds than we might typically see in tornado or rotation signatures, I should say, in tornado warnings here this time of year. 77 mile per hour winds on the eastern side of that system as it continues on its path towards the northeast. Some general times that you can expect for this system as it moves at such a high rate of speed, just 12 minutes up towards Crystal Lake, just 20 minutes from the public school near Alpha. So this one is definitely carrying a pretty high rate of speed there. Meanwhile, take you up towards places like Caryville, Chipley, or even Graceville, and notice the different color that the velocity returns are displaying. If you look at the scale on the top of your screen, for example, that's pretty much at the very upper echelon of what we have here on the color table in terms of wind speeds available. Now, that's going to be a little bit higher up in the atmosphere, but as this squall line passes with its typical updrafts and downdrafts, this is an example of what's possible, say, if you were to funnel that down towards the surface. In the lighter shades of reds down towards places like Chipley at the moment, 73 mile per hour elevated in the atmosphere. Wind speeds similar up towards Graceville at the moment, head a little bit back towards the west, and 67 miles per hour could be on the cards here. So it's not a coastal threat, and it's not just an inland threat. This is an area-wide problem that we're going to have to continue to track here off towards the easterly direction for about another hour and a half to 2 hours. Here in the Panhandle. Back towards that tornado warning itself, though, still continues south of Ebro. We'll see if we have a new radar scan and also see what that notch itself looks like, because I think sometimes with these sort of squall line setups, the reflectivity, or what you're seeing on your screen right now, is equally as effective as just using the velocity itself. And notice there still is a notch present south of Ebro. That's this shape down in here. Maybe some rotation present, but again, we could also just be seeing a pretty strong straight line wind burst punching through out ahead of that main line that's producing a similar hazard there, Ryan, but maybe not as much rotation at this time as what we previously observed. Still, though, I think if you were anywhere along 79 south of Ebro heading over towards Crystal Lake or anywhere in between on the north side of the airport in Bay County, it's probably time to find a safe place to be here for another couple of minutes.
Yeah, you just saw that last scan there, get right across 79. And you know, these little spinners that we get on the front of squall lines, it really doesn't matter. The rotation with those storms really doesn't have to be significant because it's the mechanism that creates them that actually is helping to foster stronger winds in general. So whether it actually rotates or not is not the issue. It's the ability of that little notch. It's the ability of this squall line feature itself in those little specified areas to produce a higher wind, a higher chance for damage, as opposed to just the whole line itself. Does that make sense? Those are so it's like if you had a thunderstorm come through, not everybody gets the thunderstorm, right? Some parts of it maybe just get the edges of the thunderstorm, or maybe you just get the edge of the rain, not necessarily the core of the heavy rain with it. That's what you're kind of looking at, and think of it with winds. You're looking at the core of the strongest of the winds when we see those little notches. And then you've got just the general 60-mile-an-hour winds that can be associated with the whole line. But the core little winds can get upwards of 80 miles an hour, and that's enough to trigger a tornado warning, whether it's actually rotating or not from the National Weather Service. What I want to do is talk about this batch of showers and thunderstorms. And what I want to do is talk about its motion off towards the east. Once that leading edge passes you by, you might still have about half an hour's worth of rain to go behind it. There's still a significant rain shield behind it. But it's that leading edge. Once it moves by you, then the severe weather threat for the day is done. Now, it's about 7:45 right now, 7:40, I think, here this morning. Our computer model may be a little fast, but it's not timing out too far off what's actually happening for us. Seeing that leading edge actually move its way near 231 in the next 20 to 30 minutes. And then out of Bay County as we start to move from the 8 to 9 o'clock hour, and then probably off to our eastern counties through the 9 to 10 o'clock hour there around the Apalachicola River and slide out towards the east. I think at that point in time, once we get to about 10, 11 o'clock, really a lot of the rains even will have been pushed out towards the east. There's even some inklings that we could get some breaks in our skies to occur as we get into our afternoon hours today, and it's going to be a completely different day outside as we get into the afternoon. This morning, we've had temperatures up to 70 degrees, and it's been a muggy air mass. That's been the fuel for these storms to thrive off of. But it's running right into a cold front, which is helping to create the boundary of showers and thunderstorms. And then once that cold front passes by, you're talking a 20-degree temperature change here for us as we work our way into the midday and the afternoon. We've seen it actually happen right now across the south, where our temperatures are still at about 70 degrees, and then you just looked right over towards Mississippi, and they were in the 40s. You're going to have a flip of a switch for the daytime here. Temperature-wise, it's going to get rather cold here for us, but we will at least have some sunshine to go with some of that cool down as we work our way on into the afternoon hours. Here's another computer model that's tracking out fairly similarly, maybe if not a little lagging, a little behind. That's why I wanted to give a little grace period for some of those timings as it was working its way on through. This particular computer model may be taking a little bit more so until 9 o'clock to get through Bay County. Personally, I think that's a little slow. We're already seeing it actually move through a good chunk of the western side of the county. So maybe this computer model just lagging a little bit behind on getting rid of this squall line here for us. But I do think by about 9, 10 o'clock, it'll be exiting our eastern counties of Liberty and Franklin County. The rains then will wrap up as we get into the late morning, and you see this clear skies looking much clearer as we head into our afternoon. There's still potential here for us to deal with severe weather, though, as this line moves its way on through with gusty winds winds, our biggest concern. And it's not only for us here across northwest Florida. This line of showers and thunderstorms will continue to progress off to the east. We've got scattered showers and thunderstorms already starting to move into the warm sector across Georgia and up into the Carolinas, where they'll get the two-prong event, the scattered storm, discrete cell, that supercell structure that we had earlier today, then the cold front and the squall line feature to move through as well. So there's a lot of folks under the gun here for this storm system to work its way through here for us. And that severe threat level, like we've been mentioning, has been high. Level 3 out of 5. Numerous severe thunderstorms were to be expected here for today. And unfortunately, it proved true here for us, Dan. And the damage reports that we've seen here this morning have just been rather heartbreaking. In fact, instead, let's go over to Jessica and Mel right now this morning, as Mel's just coming back from seeing some of the damage firsthand here this morning from down on Thomas Drive and around the Schooners region.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Ryan. We just got back from Schooners, and I was telling Jess it was a dramatic scene. In fact, here's some video that our producer and myself captured. You can see downed trees, pieces of the roof missing, emergency personnel everywhere. I've never seen anything like this, Jess, in my reporting career.
It's really, really just a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Look at this home.
Yeah, this
just pushed off of its foundation.
Most dramatic thing. So this is near Schooners. This home is just leaning to its side.
So right now we're seeing a lot of damage reports coming in from the east end of Panama City Beach and that Thomas Drive area. And it really is significant because this was an area that was largely impacted by Hurricane Michael. And now here we are 5 years later and we're seeing this type of damage.
Yeah.
I did talk to officials with Bay County and they did confirm that there are injuries. We don't know the extent of those injuries right now, but there are reports of injuries. And of course, you can see when you look at all of this debris, it's no wonder that we have these injuries. And it came through in the very early morning hours. And so as the sun started coming up, we were getting a better view of it. And Mel, you couldn't stay out long because we had that window before the next line came in.
That's exactly right, Jess. So another storm line was coming through, and in fact, a firefighter out there said, hey, you know, you ladies need to leave now. So we left immediately, and we heard just the crews and like the loudspeaker saying, hey, everyone shelter in place right now. That's how urgent it was. And down power lines were another concern. I know a part of Thomas Drive and North Lagoon was closed that we initially got to because of those downed power lines. And when those power lines hit water, we're looking at some major electrocution probabilities and issues. So the firefighters and the crews were telling everyone, hey, clear away from these downed power lines. We saw water that was coming up from the ground as well. But this was the most dramatic thing, this house just leaning on this other home. I've never seen anything like it. It's just completely leaning to its side, but there were strewn chairs, strewn fences, pieces of shingles. It looked like what might have been windows missing, parts of doors missing out of these homes. And our thoughts and prayers are certainly with everyone who has been impacted.
And you said this was near the Schooners area.
Yes.
Very familiar. And the Schooners, an iconic location. Did you see any damage to Schooners itself? Were you able to get that far back?
We got to the front of Schooners. We saw what looked like maybe a piece of a shingle or roof, or it might have been piping down in front of Schooners, but we didn't get to see much around it, just the front of it. So it looked like a piece of maybe a pipe or something that was down in front of it. We did see some damaged billboards, and it looked like pieces completely missing off the billboards. The main thing we were seeing were just debris, just kind of strewn everywhere.
This is near Pirates Cove Marina, legendary marine area. You can see that's legendary. And we've had reports that boats are in the roadway in some areas.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is how powerful those storms were. And we are continuing to get damage reports. Callers are calling us Ard Drive. That's an area in Cherokee Landing. There's apparently some significant damage there. And Deer Point Lake area also received some significant damage. We've had callers calling in to that area. We're going to try to get to all of these locations as soon as it's safe for our crews to do so. We did have some crews out earlier this morning after the initial storm passed, but we had about an hour window before we had to get everyone to safety.
Yeah, that's it. It was just after 6 o'clock that we left the station. I was there with my producer, Abby, and we were there just until about 7. So we had just a short window, but we saw a lot of damage in less than 1 hour, Jess. I can't even imagine if there's people who are living there. I mean, look at that. There's just fences everywhere. It looked like pieces of windows missing, shingles off the roof. We saw what looked like a hole in some person near their roof at the top of their home. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and you can see those windows blown out in some of the footage as well. The house that was leaning, when you look closely, you can see the top window had blown out, and there was a curtain hanging out the window. And it's just heartbreaking because these are people's homes, and our hearts just go out to you because, we've been through this scenario before, Mel, and it's just gut-wrenching. And once again, it's just very reminiscent of what we saw in this area 5 years ago. Of course, that from Hurricane Michael. We were in the newsroom when this one cell started coming through, and Dan told us, he said, hey, y'all need to move into the interior area. So we went into the sports office, which is the interior portion of the building, which is exactly the same place where I took shelter during Hurricane Michael during that period. And we started hearing something on the roof, and it was hail. So I think we're going to see some significant hail damage as well.
And we're hearing something else on the roof now too. But yeah, we stepped outside and we saw the hail. It was quite sizable. We have pictures on our Facebook page. And if you have any reports of storm damage, let us know. You can call our newsroom. You can email us, news@wjhg.com. Just very dramatic scenes.
See, that's where you can see that window with the curtain hanging on.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to see that.
So if you do have pictures or video that you want to share, we do have a tab on our website, but we caution you, do not try to go out right now to get any of those pictures or video of the damage, because it's just not safe to do so right now, because we do have that other line coming through. Something else we want to warn you about are those down power lines.
That's exactly right, Jess. So we do want to warn you about that. So these images that you're seeing near schooners of the damage, there were down power lines in the roadway. We had to be very careful. There are fire crews out there, Bay County Sheriff's Office. There are multiple crews, and Florida Power and Light were out there surveying the damage, and we can hear the rain coming down right now at our studio. But the down power lines, they were all over the roadway. We saw some water spouting up. It maybe looked like a main line might have been hit, but it was spouting up. Pieces of billboards were missing. There were debris just strewn everywhere, pretty much.
Yeah, and we're also getting reports in Panama City, of course, of some damage in that area. We'll have crews survey that as soon as it's safe to do so. It's really all over the area. And Bayou George area, I've gotten some storm reports there also. This is going to be a major cleanup effort.
Yes, it is. And for anyone who was impacted previously by Michael and now dealing with this damage again, my heart breaks for them, Jess. It absolutely does.
And we can deal with property damage, but I think some of the most significant reports are reports that we have injuries from this.
Yes.
And that's what we never want to hear. We do not know the extent of those injuries, and they can't confirm exactly the area where those injuries happened. I mean, you can look and you can presume perhaps where some of those injuries came from. But we will continue to monitor that. And I even heard a report, first responders were preparing the local hospitals. They were saying, hey, be on alert. We could see some significant injuries. And when you see damage like this, it's no wonder.
Yeah. Again, our thoughts and prayers are with anyone who's been impacted. We're working to learn more about those injuries, but you can see just how dangerous this would be if this was out flying, and I can't even imagine. But there was a lot of debris, fences and things strewn in pools, chairs, pieces of windows missing, pieces of the roof missing, completely gone. And like Ryan and Dan were talking about, these winds are so powerful. That's exactly what could happen, and it did happen in this case.
Well, yeah, and moving a home off of its foundation. I think it's important for us to check back in with Ryan and Dan and see what's going on, because we are hearing that rain coming down. We don't want people to be out in this right now. So, Ryan, what do you have for us right now? What are the significant impacts that we're watching out for at this moment?
Yeah, and it's going to be the leading edge of a squall line feature that's now moving its way on through. Quick little scan of some of the area here. Destin is past the worst of that squall line now, looking a little quieter. Perhaps still in Inlet Beach, some heavy rains ongoing. Further out towards the east in St. Joe Beach, it's certainly a gusty and windy one still, with probably some rain and more on the way with a squall line feature up toward Mariana. It's a camera soaked. It's trees that are bending over here in the winds that come through here for us this morning. Got a sharp temperature grade as well. It might be feeling mild outside right now, but prepare yourself for later here today, as temperatures will quickly dive right down into the 50s for us. Look at the big cold outbreak of air. That's what's driving this storm system. That's what's driving the squall line feature. Our first round was with the warm front that brought us these discrete, strong supercells that moved their way through the panhandle. That's what created the first round of damage for us this morning with that tornado that moved through Bay County. We had another one that was over towards South Walton that moved its way all the way up across the Choctawhatchee Bay, across Red Bay, and further off towards the north, where there's probably more damage from strong, incredibly strong winds. Maybe an EF1, EF2 tornadoes that developed here for us this morning. Now the cold front is bringing the squall line feature in for us, and this is where we're seeing some damaging straight line winds and still the potential that we've got tornadic activity moving through along this squall line feature itself. As we look at the tornado watch that's still in place, being trimmed off once the squall line feature moves through your neighborhood. But until then, we still have a strong line of showers and thunderstorms and the potential of seeing some more tornadic activity. Look at the tornado reports that we're getting here this morning. And as we talked about, the one that worked its way almost parallel to Highway 231 from Panama City Beach all the way up into Jackson County, and then further back west with the one that we had earlier here for today, and some of the discrete supercells that moved their way on through with EF1, EF2, maybe tornadoes. Now we've got the squall line feature moving its way into Panama City Beach. Very heavy rains are occurring with this storm system. Very gusty winds are also going to be the case here with this storm system as it works its way on through here for us. I'm going to stop us and get that leading edge looking at it right now, probably just past 79. Good chunk of Breakfast Point on down towards the coastline. Probably anybody from 70.
51% of us own a phone that's at least 3 years old. A year earlier, that number was
Pretty heavy rains and gusty winds once again in an already just hammered spot from that morning discrete supercell that came through with the tornadic activity that it did produce. And this line extends into the airport, northern Bay County, maybe just starting to get to Southport. It's going to be knocking on the door to Pretty Bayou and Lynn Haven and Panama City, as well as the Panama City FSU campus here, Gulf Coast State College, that is, and in just a little bit. Areas that were just absolutely hammered already this morning, now getting an absolutely another batch of strong thunderstorms to move their way through with gusty winds and even some potential for tornadic activity. We're seeing some tornado warnings, Dan, that are still showing up. Are we seeing strong rotation, or are we seeing just very much elevated winds that are occurring with this squall line?
It's more so elevated wind speeds than well-defined rotations. With that said, the tornado warning that moved through the northern portion of Bay County, north of the airport, there was a spotter report of a tornado on the ground just about 2 miles east of Pine Log Road. So at one point it was a producer, but again, we're watching for the quick spin-ups here as this line moves through. It's certainly a very different setup than the supercellular-like stuff that we saw earlier on in the morning hours, but still across the area right now. Look down towards southern Washington County right now. Certainly is a hint of rotation present on that velocity imaging, and more importantly, just the wind speeds even outside of that couplet there in terms of rotation. We're watching this area here for some potential tornadic activity, but all of the winds that you see, this lighter shade of pink extending all the way up from 79 over towards the east there, those are all 60, 70 mile per hour wind gusts on the leading edge of this squall line at the moment. And then again, further towards the north, up into Holmes County right now, actually transitioning over into Jackson County. it's more of a speed shear, directional shear difference here in terms of the winds being so much more elevated in terms of wind speeds a little bit further south of Graceville and then slower further north. So there's a potential there for rotation, but either way, whether it's spinning or not, we're looking at very impressive wind speeds. 91 miles per hour right now is the observed gust from our radar. And of course, if we take that cross section right now of what's happening up there heading into Jackson County, this storm is certainly capable of pushing some of those upper to mid-level wind speeds down towards the surface. I'll slide this down towards you so you can see it a little bit more clearly. Not very common this time of year to see a 40,000 foot tall thunderstorm, and that suggests to us that we not only have strong updrafts, but strong downdrafts, and those stronger downdrafts were extremely useful for these storms in order to funnel some of those mid to lower level wind speeds away from the surface right down to the ground and provide some of these damaging wind gusts that we're observing. The height of these storms is also why you see such prolific lightning producers embedded within this line as it moves towards the east, and it's really helping to sustain a pretty active situation here across the area in terms of this squall line moving towards the east. Rainfall really picking up here at the TV station and portions of Bay County right now. We're kind of sliding this squall line along the beaches here. Not really seeing a whole lot more than just strong wind gusts at the immediate coastline. Still a few notches present in there as well, and those irregularities, the lack of a straight line moving from the coastline down towards the south would tell us we still have to keep a close eye for places like Tyndall Air Force Base or maybe Mexico Beach, later St. Joe Beach, for the potential for a water spout or a quick spin up. But outside of that, once again, our two tornado threats, Ryan, are a little bit further north heading into Jackson County. Both of those warnings now heading into Jackson County, showing maybe a broad rotation, but more importantly, a very impressive straight line wind speed.
Yeah, you know, it's not so much the rotation anymore, but those little notches on that squall line are just the indications of the points on the squall line feature where we actually have the peaks of some of the maximum winds. And yes, they might be rotating just a little bit, but it's not necessarily a tornadic spin to it, or at least enough to maybe produce a strong tornado. We could maybe see some weak ones, and they'll be brief and kind of skip along here with the storm system itself as it moves its way through with the squall line feature itself. I've brought up the hail tracker, though, because we have had some reports lately of seeing some hail involved in some of this squall line that's worked its way on through. Let's get into some of the more powerful batches here of the thunderstorm, and this is showing hail and also hail tracks. So that's why it kind of looks like maybe an embedded cell in that squall line tracked its way with hail that might be up to, at some points in times, half an inch or maybe 3/4. There you go, right in between half an inch and 3/4 of an inch of in terms of size, diameter. Here earlier this morning with the discrete supercell that came through Bay County, we had over an inch, about an inch and a quarter sized hailstones that were falling out of the sky with that storm cell, just to give you the indication of the power that's involved in the atmosphere with these storms that came through and unfortunately created mass havoc in many locations here this morning and damage as they work their way on through. I'm going to bring up radar in some of these locations. You're probably going to see some very deep reds showing up. And so as the storm continues to progress off towards the north, we might still be getting maybe some half inch. So if you think about half inch, it's roughly about a little bit bigger than a pea, or maybe close to about a dime size hail that could be falling in terms of size of the storms. When we talk about hail in terms of inches, we're not talking about inches off the ground at accumulation. We're talking about diameter, the size of the hailstone itself. So within this storm system that's moving its way across Holmes and Washington County right now to the north, not only are we seeing the potential for gusty winds, but yeah, we're also getting some small hailstones, some maybe pea or dime size hailstones to actually work their way on through. Let's slide a little bit further down towards the south. Of course, we've got the tornado warned cell, but this is largely straight line wind driven here. That's going to be very potent in terms of some of those winds. If we bring up velocity right now, you can still see there is a little couplet, but it's largely winds that are moving away from the radar scan. Notice how we don't see a whole lot of green showing up here. This is largely just a wind-driven straight line wind that might be getting upwards of 60 to 80 miles per hour on the leading edge of this thunderstorm complex. There's a velocity measurement right now, and of course, you know, this storm system is now removed from the radar scan by tens of miles, but that upper level wind that might be at about 60 to 80 miles per hour, that's just a couple thousand feet off the ground, is certainly going to be able to get pushed down towards the surface with the downdrafts of these the squall line feature. And so that's why there's still a big threat. And whenever you get maybe about a 50 to 60 mile per hour wind, it's enough to warrant a severe thunderstorm warning. When you start to push those wind speeds up higher than 60 miles per hour, and especially as they get up to 80 miles per hour, whether you have rotation or not, it's worthy enough to produce damage, so you get an automatic tornado warning just to be issued on that cell or on that segment of, say, a squall line feature to work its way on through. So here we are east of 77, east of Vernon. We're starting to approach 231 again with another batch of rain here into an already hard-hit location that's just going to be on the border of Washington County. Bay County is nosing its way just up into here with portions of Youngstown, maybe a little further to the south of this line. It's still a little bit west of you, but the strongest of the winds may be occurring more towards the Betts region, and then looking a little bit further off towards the north, Dan, as another batch of very strong winds are coming through.
Yeah, the straight line winds are certainly impressing. And one last update on that tornado warning cell at the very top of Holmes County, now Jackson County, just east of Graceville right now. There is a debris ball, a tornado debris signature on the east side of Graceville, and that goes along with an earlier report that we've just seen come in from the National Weather Service. It was a local storm report about 3 miles east-southeast of Mariana itself. Remember that tornado that kind of walked up 231 and then passed just to the east-southeast there? Structural damage was reported for multiple mobile homes within that area. The damage not really gone into much detail, but made to sound like it's a somewhat significant impact into that region. Other reports coming in via email for us that there is other damage up towards Jackson County. So that same tornado that brought all sorts of impacts into Bay County really held itself together and brought similar and destructive impacts up into Jackson County for another area that was somewhat impacted pretty heavily by Hurricane Michael about 5 years ago, and now going through that rough patch of weather once again. And as you look at your screen here, we're watching one last area. These still showing more robust signs of actual spin compared to the other tornado warned area on this squall line. That's about to leave Florida and head into southeastern Alabama, but just to the north of Graceville right now, a little bit northeast at the moment, producing what looks to be at least a tornadic signature and velocity. Previously showed somewhat of a hook in there, now a little bit more robust of an inflow layer there, and then of course the tornado debris signature also present. So we could possibly be seeing damage from this leading edge of the squall line and a potential tornado embedded within that line, producing damage just on the east side of Graceville at the moment. The rest of the area right now in the Panhandle dealing with much more of a straight line wind threat, as Ryan mentioned. We got other reports via email that they were not that impressive towards the coastline, especially towards Pier Park on the west end of the beach. So a positive trend there. At least it seemed like some of those upper level winds didn't get funneled down to the surface, even as they appeared to be pretty gusty up at 3,000 or 4,000 feet in the atmosphere. But we still have to continue to watch this line as it moves off towards the east over the next hour or so and continues to produce what we expect to be pretty breezy conditions, frequent lightning, and as you might hear over my microphone right now, Ryan, it's some pretty heavy rainfall to coincide with it too. Saturated grounds, trees down, not unlikely at this time.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. Yeah, that cell up there north of the one that we're watching here in Washington County, up in Holmes County, is certainly showing some pretty good rotation. We still have some very gusty straight line winds now with the other storm cell that's a little further down 77 and 231 to the south that's producing some wind gusts of around 60 to 70 miles per hour on the northern tier of this system. As you heard from the viewer, mentioned that maybe the winds down towards the coast are relaxing just a little bit here, or at least maybe not as severe. And that's kind of what you're looking at here right now. You're getting a very relaxed shade of red red, indicating that we've got winds, or a darker shade, I should say, which means that you're closer in scale to the toward, or at least into the zone of where our winds aren't at a maximum. When they move away and you start to get into the brighter shades of pinks or the brighter shades of green and into the blues, that's when you start to get the peak winds of either a wind moving away from the radar or a wind moving toward the radar, respectively. But when you're closer to the middle of the scale between the two, that's when you actually have a more relaxed wind outside. And so that's what we're starting to see overtake portions of Panama City Beach right now, and further back towards the west. Now, it's still raining. You're still going to get some thunder activity and some lightning activity outside for us as well as this continues to work its way further off towards the east. And it still appears there might be some moderate gusts out towards the east side of town in Panama City, Springfield, Callaway region, and then down towards Tyndall right now as that continues to migrate further towards the south. But as that viewer mentioned, yeah, it's certainly not as bad as some locations that are a little further along this line, further up towards the north. And you can really see the line defined on velocity right now. Velocity, again, is something that the radar scan can detect the way that things are moving in the atmosphere, their speed and their direction. And so it gives us an idea of how fast winds are moving in the atmosphere. And right now through Alford, Cottondale, we've got some of the strongest winds all the way that stretches back to Chipley. This is moving 25 miles an hour toward the east right now. So it might be about 10 more minutes of some gusty conditions before it slides east of Cottondale. And Chipley, you'll be quieting down much like Bonifay is, just about 5-10 minutes up the road towards the west. Mariana, though, you're starting to get more involved in some of the gustier winds in association with this squall line feature. Let's get back over to our reflectivity. Certainly got a lot of lightning still occurring within this storm system itself. It's very noisy. It's very gusty. And it's just starting to move into Mariana right now. Malone, you're going to get it here in about 10-15 minutes, the leading edge of some gusty winds and another batch of thunderstorms. You can see it stretching right down Highway 231 here and maybe just about to get into portions of 231 near the Youngstown region and Fountain region here in the next 10 or 12 minutes. Once we get this batch, this leading edge to work its way on through, we're going to be talking about conditions much improving here as we get into the second half of the morning and then eventually as we get into the afternoon. In fact, if you look over toward Pensacola, those lighter shades of green that you see right now and even some clear skies on radar over Pensacola indicating that the rain has almost come to a stop out there towards the far western tip of the Panhandle. So we just got another good solid hour's worth of rain with the gustiest of the winds to go here as this storm system moves through. Okay, just getting information right now.
FDOT just closed Hathaway Bridge and West Bay Bridge.
FDOT just closed the Hathaway Bridge and the West Bay Bridge. This storm system is still producing quite a bit of gusty winds. Now, I don't imagine that's going to be for the whole day. But we did just get that information that emergency officials are going to go ahead and let this squall line feature move its way through with those gusty winds and perhaps give you a dangerous commute. If you're trying to make your way through this storm system right now, it's not even a good idea to be out on the roadways. We need to just let it go through and then we can get about to our days.
No, certainly not, Ryan. And I think that the reason why they probably would have gone with that bridge closure right about now, the Hathaway Bridge especially, this line of storms, not only as Ryan mentioned, producing such breezy conditions. The line itself is moving at 70 miles per hour, so you can imagine how easy it would be to create some very dangerous conditions when driving over that bridge. And the speed, at least, causing some problems for travel right now, although it is somewhat of a silver lining that we'll be done with this system here pretty shortly. Let's take the camera here full screen, the weather itself showing that well, we have about an hour or so with this line at its current rate of speed on its current trajectory in order to move all those rain showers, at least the leading edge of our squall line, off towards the east of our viewing area. And from there, we'll be able to enjoy a couple of lighter showers at first and then general clearing out throughout the rest of the day. So hang in there for an hour if you haven't seen the worst of the weather yet. After that, we will actually begin to see skies starting to clear across the area. In fact, by the afternoon, we might even see a few peaks of sunshine. Now, now, currently, wind speeds remain breezy, and I expect it to stay that way for the rest of the day. But once again, the bridge closures are more likely a product of that line of storms moving through right now. And as Ryan said, it's not an all-day thing. Look at the backside of the cold front, wind speeds just 10 to 15 miles per hour, maybe as high as 20 miles per hour out of the northwesterly direction compared to a brisk southerly flow of 35 to even 50 miles per hour in spots right now. Those just reported at the airports across the area. In between, fill in the gaps. There could certainly be a couple of isolated pockets of higher gusts, not nearly as high as what we saw at the airport in Destin earlier, but still breezy for most of the area right now, of course. That cold front changing things significantly too. Temperatures ahead of that squall line still ripe for storm development and sustaining the power of this squall line itself. Upper 60s, near 70 degrees ahead of the cold front, and that's why we're still seeing such frequent lightning and powerful conditions out across that storm system. Dew points remain very sticky out ahead of it as well, but significant changes coming behind it, dropping down into the 50s and 40s for dew points there. Watch how over the course of this afternoon, temperatures, well, we're at our high temperatures right about now, and we'll start to cool down into the evening hours tonight. A very different feel starting off the daytime hours tomorrow, and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it'll be chilly, albeit sunny and not nearly breezy enough like it is out there right now. So wind gusts currently, once again, they're right within that window of closing the Hathaway Bridge, but over the next couple of hours here in Panama City Beach, right next to the Hathaway Bridge, we expect things to calm down pretty quickly. In fact, already hearing the rain lighten up here at the station, so positive trends in the forecast, certainly not a whole lot of reason for concern. And as Ryan mentioned a second ago, it's also just so stormy out there, there's really no reason to travel anyway. Let's send things over to Jess and Mel. I hear you guys have an update for us on some of the damage across the area.
Yeah, we have several updates. Yes. One, a school closure. Gulf Coast State College, they have now canceled classes on all of their campuses for the rest of the day. Originally, they were going to do a delayed start, and now because of the continuing severe weather, they have decided to close all campuses. And that's good because FHP just let us know that the Hathaway Bridge and the West Bay Bridge have both been temporarily closed.
That's right. So just try to avoid going out for now if you can, like Ryan and Dan were saying. Stay home, let the storm pass. Those winds are really picking up. We're also hearing about power outages. At least 10,000 customers with Western Florida Co-op.
Yeah, West Florida Co-op, West Florida Electric Co-op. That's in the Jackson County area, also encompasses Shipley, Bonifay. They're saying more than 10,000 are without power right now, and that's because of debris and those down power lines.
And they're saying it could be a significant amount of time before that power is restored. So please just be patient if you are dealing with some power outages right now. But again, that's just the initial report's 10,000.
And we have heard that there are injuries here in Bay County. We don't know the extent of those injuries, but we do know that there are some injuries. Our area hospitals have been preparing for perhaps an influx of those. And Mel, you were able to get out and look at some of the damage before this next line came through. It was a small window, about an hour, where we had to assess the damage. And let's talk about what you saw when you went out. You were in the Thomas Drive area.
That's right, Jess. So near Schooners, you can see some of the images here, but there was debris pretty much everywhere. So we saw just pieces of homes strewn. It looked like pieces of the roofing. We saw chairs and fences completely down. It looked like windows were no longer where they should be. And it's just dramatic to see everything kind of just strewn along the ground there. But the most dramatic thing we saw, which you'll see it in a minute, is a house that was just leaning, and you could see the windows were out there as well. But again, you could just see that was difficult to see, and I really hope no one was home at the time. But it was a lot of just debris, fences, pieces of wood. Down power lines were another problem. So outside of Schooners, the roadway was shut down because of numerous power lines that were down in the roadway. And of course, that can be an electrocution hazard with the water there. So it was a lot of dramatic images of just pieces of the roof missing too.
Did you see anyone walking around when you were out there?
I did. So besides the emergency personnel who were out, like the firefighters, Bay County Sheriff's Office, FPL crew, I did see just a couple people walking. At the point where we were out close to 7 in the morning, crews were saying for everyone to leave. So at that point, when we were leaving to come back to the station, I did see a couple people out on the sidewalk, actually. They were walking pretty quickly, probably to seek shelter, but very few people out besides the emergency personnel.
So we're talking the east end of Panama City Beach, so Pirates Cove Marina, your legendary marine. We're hearing reports of boats that have been flung into the roadway in that area. This is very reminiscent of what we saw during Hurricane Michael just 5 years ago. This was an area that was impacted then, and now we're seeing them impacted now. Just as they're beginning to build back and getting everything back to normal, here we have this. And of course, we know that structures can be rebuilt, but it's the human life that we worry about. And we have reports of injuries. Again, we don't know the extent of those injuries, but we do know that they have happened.
Yeah, so we're working to learn more about that, and our hearts and our prayers are certainly with everyone who was impacted by the storm. But again, you can just see that, like you were saying, Jess, the images reminiscent of Hurricane Michael with the debris strewn everywhere, the house that was just leaning, pieces of fence. There were things strewn into a pool as well, so we saw a lot of just random debris in a pool, but fences completely missing, pieces of the roof missing. I went to the front of Schooners. I didn't see too much damage, just that it looked like something metal there in front. Another thing we saw, billboards were damaged too. So billboards were leaning, and that could be dangerous if you're too close to it too. So billboards were leaning, and there were pieces of the images just completely gone off the billboards as well.
It's just not safe for anyone to be out and about right now. We need to wait until this line of storms completely moves out of our area, because your life is not worth it. So stay off those roadways. In fact, the Hathaway Bridge is temporarily closed right now. The West Bay Bridge, temporarily closed right now because of these winds. And you can see how powerful they are. I mean, they moved a house off of the foundation earlier this morning. And it's not just in Bay County where we're seeing this damage. We're also getting those reports up in Jackson County. We heard reports of significant damage of a campground up in the Jackson County area.
Yeah, that's true. A viewer was saying that there's a lot of damage at a campground in Marietta. So if you have any information or images you'd like to share with us, again, stay safe, stay inside. But if you have some images that you'd like to share or reports of storm damage, you can go ahead and email us news@wjhg.com and let us know what you're seeing in your area.
Yes, but we don't recommend you going out and getting those images right now. So we do want your safety to be top of mind when we're looking at this. And we've only been able to just scratch the surface of the damage because we had a very short window to be able to get out and assess before we had to bring our crews back because we have to make sure that they're safe. So we will be getting out to those other areas throughout the day just to show you what's happened and to talk with you and to share your stories. But just know that our thoughts and prayers are with everyone that has damage. And we're seeing this significant damage, but there's also going to be some hail damage, probably to cars and roofs, because we saw some significant hail as well.
Yeah, Ryan was saying like an inch and a half of hail, and we saw it right outside our station, Jess. So yeah, I can imagine that we're going to be getting reports of some more hail damaging property, vehicles perhaps, so yeah.
At one point, it was no longer safe for us to stay in the newsroom, so we had to shelter in an interior office, and that's when we started hearing the hail hitting our roof. We were like, oh, what is that? And, oh, it's hail.
Yeah, so we just want everyone to be safe. We're going to check back in with meteorologist Ryan Michaels to see what the latest is on this storm that you and Dan have been tracking.
Yeah, that's right, guys. Yeah, you're talking about the hail that we saw here this morning. I recently just viewed a picture of a hailstone that was about 3 inches by 3 inches that fell with that supercell that came through with the tornado here in Bay County that went on to produce quite a bit of more damage as it worked its way up Highway 231 and up into Marietta. All right, we're watching the leading edge of the squall line feature now continue to traverse its way further off towards the east. Embedded in that line, we've seen some rotation. We've seen even reports of brief, weak spinnings, tornadoes associated with this line. And the line itself is still producing in some locations some elevated winds for us of upwards of 60 to 70 miles per hour. So we still have a very powerful line that's working its way through the panhandle. Severe thunderstorm boxes, warning boxes are in place. Tornado warnings are also issued and in place here for us as well. One of which is in eastern portions of Bay County right now, stretching into Calhoun County. That one lasting for another 25 minutes. Another tornado warning lasts until 9 o'clock here Central Time this morning up into Jackson Johnson County. Let's dive into these two storm systems and see what we've got embedded in the squall line feature here. I'm going to ask Dan if you wouldn't mind turning my lightning off. You can see that it's certainly coming down, though, pretty hard in Youngstown to be producing that much lightning. But what catches my eye right away, right near Youngstown, is just that small little notch that you're seeing here on radar. That's indicating that we've got winds that are actually strong enough coming into the squall line to actually push back a bit of the rain and then wrap around this storm system and come right back out on the front end. And that gives us that little notch, or what we see can sometimes produce a brief, weak spin up of a tornado, or maybe a highly localized area of some very potent winds. So right now in Youngstown, we need to go ahead and find our safe place. It's really just to the south and east of you, but folks around the Youngstown area, it's pretty hairy outside. We need to be hunkered down until this squall moves its way on through in general. Now, this line is moving its way at a slower pace than the discrete storms that we had here this morning at about 25 miles per hour. But if we go ahead and squall track this out, probably towards the Bluntstown area here in just a little bit from now, maybe a little bit quicker on some of these numbers than what actually we'll see here for us. But the Frink area, Rollins Corner, Clarksville, you guys will be up here in the next, let's say 10 to 20 minutes as it continues to traverse its way out of Bay County and moving more into Calhoun County now in the next 20 minutes or so, that we'll see this system and the squall line feature itself even move that direction. Now, we did have another squall feature producing maybe some rotation a little bit further towards the north, this more up Highway 231, and we're looking at maybe the potential of seeing a little notching going on right on the border there, but well, we're kind of looking at something that may be a little bit further off towards the north. Dan, there's one that's up here. I can't seem to locate it here myself, unless we're getting a little closer to it, maybe a little bit more so north of Malone here at this location. Is that the tornado warn segment? That looks like it's some pretty powerful winds still associated with that line.
Yeah, you got it. That actually had a tornado debris signature earlier, but now is remaining warmed largely because of the strong straight line wind gusts that have the ability to produce tornado-like damage. We got to talk this morning about the squall line itself and how straight line winds and rotating winds at the same speeds really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. It's going to do damage. And that's what the National Weather Service has been kind of outlining with that tornado warning that you see up just towards north of the Florida-Alabama border, heading into southwestern Georgia, a little bit to the east of Dothan. There's a small couplet there, some broader rotation now compared to when it was passing near Graceville, but it's mainly just the high wind speeds, the elevated wind speeds getting funneled right down towards the surface. Another update too on that tornado warning exiting Bay County, now heading in towards Calhoun County. That one has been a bit of an interesting story here, following up 231 very close, just about 8 or so miles south of where we saw the last tornado passed through earlier this morning in that area. This one has not produced any sort of a real indicator to us that there's been a tornado on the ground, but still look towards Youngstown. Rotation is certainly present in the middle and upper parts of the atmosphere here. That velocity couplet, as we've talked about, continues to show some rotation, generally heading off towards that east-northeasterly direction, maybe a bit more northeasterly than that, actually, moving at a very high rate of speed as well, though. 60 to 70 mile per hour is the general movement towards the northeast of all of these thunderstorms on the leading edge of that squall line, which means we really don't have a long time to go here with the rainfall itself across the area. In fact, for most of Bay County now, we're seeing the departure of that leading edge, the worst of the weather. But I want to point out something interesting on that leading edge, out into the Gulf of Mexico. We've been seeing some hints of rotation down there over the last 30 minutes or so. I've been kind of monitoring this notchy kind of nature of that leading edge of the squall line heading towards the east. And certainly it looks like we may have to keep an eye on maybe a few water spouts moving ashore here over the next 10 minutes or so down towards Mexico Beach, maybe St. Joe Beach, and then look a little bit further south towards Port St. Joe. Kind of hard to say this far in advance, but there's certainly a potential for pretty much anything along this line here to maybe tighten up a little bit and consolidate and become some sort of rotation. So we'll watch for areas like this. I still think straight line winds will be the most important hazard that you have to keep an eye out for here, in addition to just all the lightning and, of course, the heavy rainfall that's set to come over the next couple of minutes. These storms, though, still have about just an hour or so before they depart out of the eastern portion of our viewing area, Liberty, Franklin County, and head off towards the Big Bend region. And they will, in fact, continue to produce a severe weather hazard pretty much all the way up to the east coast of the United States. That's including the Florida Peninsula as well. We're going to be watching for a very similar outcome here as what we saw. That enhanced risk carries all the way down towards I-4 in Central Florida. So as we say goodbye, this system itself will not say goodbye to the potential for severe weather. It's still going to be a pretty long road ahead for the folks a little bit further east of us in Florida. Hopefully we see less damage in the future as what we've seen so far with this system. Back to our watches and warnings, though, we still do have a tornado watch as well. So although there's just 2 tornado warnings currently present, one of which now in the northern part of the county, or into southeastern Alabama and southwestern Georgia, there's also now, of course, 2. One heading into Calhoun County, the other one heading across Mexico Beach, likely in the next couple of minutes, and then in over towards Gulf County. And that's the one we outlined just a second ago. It's right down here in the Gulf of Mexico, likely a tornadic water spout, potentially not even on the ground, or maybe just going to weaken once it moves ashore, as we often see. A lot less friction out over the Gulf of Mexico compared to the land itself. So it's easier for these spinners to develop out over the open waters, and then we'll see if it really holds together and turns into anything as it moves over Mexico Beach into the southeast corner of Bay County and then over into Gulf County. But regardless, of course, there is rotation in the atmosphere. Wind speeds are elevated within that rotation. I'm sure we'll find a couple of pockets of probably 60 and 70 mile per hour wind speeds at the moment, which is exactly what is present there. So if you're in Mexico Beach, even a little bit further down towards St. Joe Beach, I don't know about all the way down towards Port St. Joe, but certainly those 2 areas, and then over towards Overstreet and eventually Weewa, especially with the speed of this system, you're going to want to find a safe interior room of your house right now and just hunker down here for the next 10 to 15 minutes. This will be a pretty quick moving system. It will pass quickly, but with the rotation present in the atmosphere and, of course, the tornado warning itself, you don't have really a choice after the history of today. You're going to have to take this one seriously. And once again, it is currently out over the Gulf of Mexico. And curiously enough, Ryan, I think I might have a camera queued up here. We could probably take a look down out over the Gulf of Mexico and see if we see any sort of water spout out there. I've been kind of just following along with our webcams across the area, and I think I have one of St. Joe Beach. Certainly breezy conditions out there. This might be a little bit further south than where I'd expect that water spout to move ashore. And I think some of the rain is wrapping around it and making it pretty difficult to really spot anything over the Gulf of Mexico. One thing you can notice, though, is how roughed up the Gulf of Mexico is itself. I think lost in all of the severe weather we've seen on land is the fact that the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico have seen some very impressive wind speeds, certainly churned up out there as well, with coastal flooding possible and maybe some beach erosion set to occur here across most of our coastline over the next, over the course of the overnight hours and heading into today as well. But once again, Ryan, I think we have maybe even a water spout out there. We just have to keep a close eye on it here and see what happens once it gets to the friction of the land, and maybe we'll weaken, hopefully, and become more of a straight line wind gust again.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, check out the weather stem cameras from Mexico Beach. Get those queued up. Let me know when you do, and we'll pop those up here into the forecast. But let's talk about where this line is actually making its way through here right now, and where we'll be going here as we work our way on into the next few hours. Let me get rid of my tools here for just a second. There you go. The line is going to slide out further towards the east over the next hour or so. In fact, maybe about an hour and a half from now, we're largely east of the Apalachicola River, with the showers and thunderstorms largely then over Franklin and Liberty counties. And then it would only be about another half an hour for it to slide a little further out towards the east to get into the Tallahassee region, Leon County, Gadsden, counties out there towards the east and Quincy. By then, most of us will actually probably see most of the rain done here as lunchtime even unfolds. Our skies actually start to shape up to even seeing some sunshine as we get into our afternoon hours. This is a cold frontal system that's sliding its way out towards the east, and once it does pass us by, we are talking about, winds relaxing but shifting in direction. We've had a predominant southerly wind here overnight, and as of this morning, it pumped up our winds all the way up to about sustained to 50 to 60 miles per hour. As of about now, we're coming down maybe to just more of a substantial 30 to 45 mile per hour wind gust. And then we'll see that actually when the squall line moves its way on through, dip down even further here. Winds will calm just a little bit more so, but you got about a 20 to 30 mile per hour wind, maybe even still possible as those winds shift to the northwest as we get into our afternoon. But we'll go from actually what was some mild temperatures here this morning and actually see some conditions that get cooler later today. Dan, did you get those cameras up?
Yeah, certainly it is. It's looking extremely windy out over at Mexico Beach, and I think we might be catching exactly what we were trying to find images of here over in Mexico Beach. The wind speeds in the last 20 seconds have increased significantly, and I'll switch back and forth here. Look at the winds that are currently present down there. That's got to be in excess of 50 or 60, maybe even 70 miles per hour coming straight off the Gulf of Mexico, basically untouched. There's no friction, of course, out there. And tornado or not, this could be potentially doing damage to the community of Mexico Beach right now, or at the very least rearranging some folks' front yards and producing some other issues out across that area. I'll take you back to the first image that we had. This is the one that looks a little bit more towards the southeast, and that's looking away from the direction that I think we'd see that waterspout come from. But the wind speeds, generally for the duration and the way that those wind speeds looked, I mean, the way the palm trees are moving around and such, the boat's rocking out in the water, and the camera itself is really kind of holding on for its dear life here. I think we have a pretty rough leading edge of this squall line at the very least. And once again, there is a tornado warning for Mexico Beach and then interior portions of Gulf County as well. That could be what we potentially just saw. Once again, we're watching for that notchy little structure that was rotation out over the Gulf of Mexico, now moving in towards Mexico Beach. It's probably just moved over the land right now. And although we're not seeing the signature that would suggest tornado, we certainly have video evidence now that would suggest this is still a very strong leading edge of this squall line that can produce some very impressive wind speeds that still have the capability of doing EF0-like damage, even if you don't see rotation out there. Straight line winds is certainly elevated, especially across this coastal portion of the line of storms. I also noticed, Ryan, just a second ago, we had another new tornado warning. So I'm going to try to pop up our velocity image here using the radar tools itself to spot some areas of rotation. I think we'll start right down towards Mexico Beach once again and see if we'll see any real broad rotation. It doesn't appear as if that's the case right now. It's really no rotation at all, just a pretty elevated wind speed. You could sample that, and 50 miles per hour seems about accurate for the movement of the trees at which we saw there. Heading up along this line, still a tornado warning heading towards Bluntstown. This one does have a little bit of that rotating like structure, but again, it seems like more of a straight line wind threat, very similar to what you just saw on the cameras down towards Mexico Beach. And some of the wind speeds in here, I would not be surprised if we sampled those, albeit a few thousand feet up in the atmosphere, and saw exactly that. Maybe a 75 mile per hour wind at 3,000 feet. So certainly possible at places like Chipola or Alta could see maybe a 40 or 50 mile per hour gust over the next 10 minutes as this line moves through. A little bit further north, just towards the west of Cyprus, southeast of Mariana, some rotation, maybe fringe rotation present there too, but again, just straight line winds posing a pretty large hazard here. So Ryan, the National Weather Service is really using that tornado warning as a tool to alert people of tornadic-like impacts, even if the winds are just tornado speed and maybe not moving in a circle.
Yeah, and it's exactly what they kind of do sometimes, just to get that triggered warning to go out to your phones and to let you know that the peak of some of the winds in the squall line are just about to move in upon you. So if your phones do go off for a specific tornado warning, it might not necessarily be an actual tornado on the ground, but it might be the very gusty winds that we're seeing. Now, we are seeing some little notches and some brighter patches along the way here for us, and that most certainly can still create some damage, whether those winds are actually rotating enough to produce a tornado all the way towards the ground here for us. But you got the leading edge now starting to inch its way a little further east of Highway 231. We're starting to move our way into Gulf County, getting more centralized into Calhoun County, right over the Alpha region, though. We've got the gustiest of the winds with that segment of the squall line occurring right now in your neighborhood. So let's give it another 20, 30 minutes. Let's wait for some of this powerful winds to back off before we get back to doing our regular scheduled day here for us. But back off even for Jackson County as well. Now there's quite a bit of gusty winds occurring even up towards these storms, but necessarily not something that's on the ground, tornado on the ground. It's more or less just indications that we've got some pretty strong winds moving through with this squall line feature. In fact, if we go ahead and zoom in a little bit more so onto portions of Jackson County and up into the steam mill region, and maybe just a little bit of couplet starting to show up here in that location. That did catch my eye there on radar. So steam mill region, you guys could be dealing with maybe something that's a little bit more rotational in nature there. And the reason I say that is because of the colors that we're seeing on our velocity scale. If it's red, that means that it's actually moving away from the radar. If it's green, it's moving toward the radar. And you see the Fort Rucker radar scan there coming in right around the Dothan region, just to the top left side of your screen. And so if you draw that out, you get the idea that we got winds coming to a more southeasterly direction, just to the southwest side of the steam mill area, and then to the northeast side of the city. We've got winds actually that are going the opposite direction, right back toward the radar. And so that in turn gives us the potential for actually seeing some rotation in this leading edge of the squall line that's moving its way on through. Now that's to the east of Malone, and Malone on back toward Graceville, even Cottondale. Marietta, you're starting to finally relax just a little bit after you had some pretty gusty winds move through not just too long ago. But it'll just be probably another 15 minutes for folks up there in far northeastern portions of Jackson County and then eastern side of Jackson County to watch this all slide its way further off towards the east. This is a loop over the last hour, I believe, as we were watching some of these storms move their way on through. And you get the idea that there's little just embedded notches in that line of pretty strong winds that's moving its way on through that could have some minor rotation involved in them. And so let's switch back to the leading frame here for us, and that's now starting to move its way up into the Georgia region. I'm going to slide a little further down. Let's get back down into southern portions of Jackson County. This is where we're also seeing some very gusty winds. Again, when you start to see those brighter shades of pink, that's radar indicated winds that are moving away from, well, what's now a switch up in radar. That's over towards the Red Bay on the left side of your screen. So all of these winds are rapidly moving in the atmosphere off from west to east. And so that maybe is still giving us a little bit of gusty scenario there across 90, maybe just north of the Grand Ridge region here in just a little bit, or maybe moving into Grand Region if you're just living on the north side of town not too long from now. Alpha, things are looking a little bit better for you here at this particular point in time after the latest radar scan. Maybe still a little bit stormy for us if we bring up radar, but I'm not seeing too much in terms of rotation there. Still very noisy. Look at all the lightning strikes that we've seen here with this storm system. I'll tell you what, we might be able to query some of those lightning strikes just over the Alpha region, and you got 36 that have happened here just momentarily. And over the last radar scan, we picked up 36 lightning strikes over Alpha. And that can still be dangerous here for us with these heavy rains that are moving their way on through. Whether or not we're actually seeing any tornadic cells here over Alpha anymore is probably not the case, but still a pretty gusty thunderstorm that's moving its way on through. Let's go further towards the south as we start to look at Bluntstown now. You're just west or just east, and the storm is just west of you. This latest squall line feature will be coming through momentarily with some gusty winds, so maybe not necessarily anything that's exactly tornadic along that line, but pretty powerful winds will be continuing to race their way east across Calhoun County, and you're probably just a few minutes away from getting the leading edge of that. Now, looking a little further down towards Wewa-Hitchcock, there's a little something that catches your eye on radar scans if we're looking for notches and inflows, but when you bring in velocity, it's just kind of uniform winds here that are occurring in this general location. The further down we go, now a little bit more of that squall line interacting with a bit more of the friction, the surface of the Gulf of Mexico gives us a brighter shade and a brighter color of green, indicating we got some pretty good winds actually going toward the radar right up into this squall line feature, relatively unimpeded. And so they're producing maybe some 50, 60 mile per hour winds there on the coastline. That's starting to work its way across Cape San Blas and moving its way toward Port St. Joe here at this hour. It's 8:40 this morning. We're a good 2/3 of the way through this event. We got one more third to go, Dan, and Gulf, Calhoun, Jackson counties, they're going to be the next to go through the squall line feature, but probably in about, what did I say? It's 8:40, probably about 9 o'clock. They'll more than likely be mostly out of the clear.
Yeah, I think about 9:15, we should have everybody through the leading edge of this line of showers and thunderstorms, that squall line itself. After that, if you're worried about any rainfall lingering behind the front, posing a risk of severe weather, well, temperatures are dropping very quickly behind that cold front. We have no instability and really no risk of any of those becoming anything more than a light sort of drizzly rain to go alongside cool temperatures. Haven't quite gotten there yet, though, towards Wewa outside right now. We are awaiting the arrival, just a couple of minutes away from some pretty strong showers and thunderstorms moving through there. Probably going to get pretty noisy towards Wewa here in a few minutes, and maybe we'll see things get windy there as well. It certainly was over towards Mexico Beach moments ago. Not hard to spot that leading edge of the squall line itself transitioning off towards the east. It's heading more in a northeasterly direction, so we're still feeding in moisture off the Gulf of Mexico, even as the cold front shifts towards the easterly direction like this. The storms themselves kind of training in along that. Luckily, it's moving at a quick enough pace that we're not seeing any real potential for training thunderstorms and flooding. But it's still not hard to pick out where the leading edge is in terms of our tornado warnings, and we're now able to start clearing a couple of areas from the worst of the weather. Walton, Holmes, even looking like Washington and most of Bay County now. We're stuck with a light rainfall here for an hour or two before we start to actually clear things out, cool down pretty quickly, and maybe even see some sunshine into this afternoon. Further towards the east, though, still a severe thunderstorm warning until 9:30 this morning. That'll pretty much encompass everybody in Liberty County and a majority of Franklin County as well. Already seeing the stronger line of storms sliding on into Gulf County right now. And I think we're about to start seeing some pretty heavy rainfall return towards Wewa as well. It's been a breezy part of the storm system here down there, but of course, still awaiting for that arrival. Several tornado warnings ongoing, though, from basically up along I-10 all the way down towards the coastline, all of which largely because of a couple of notches in there and also just a pretty good chance for some spin or just high elevated wind speeds, I should say, in the atmosphere. So, of course, we'll continue to watch this line continue off towards the east. It doesn't seem like there's too many damaging hazards beyond just the straight line wind threat. We'll be keeping an eye on any significant changes in terms of spin present in the atmosphere. But until then, we'll check in for an update with Mel and Jess.
And of course, we are continuing to get those damage reports coming in. And this is what I want to show you. This is Jackson County. And this is coming in from Merritt Mill Pond. Damage to some camper trailers there. FHP is assisting the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. So you can just see just how bad that damage is there in Jackson County.
Yes, debris just kind of strewn everywhere, and that looks like a camper or something
Yeah.
on its side there.
Yeah, it's right there at Merritt Mill Pond is that area.
If you do have reports of storm damage, you can email us news@wjhg.com. Please stay safe, stay where you're at. But if you happen to see anything, let us know. We also want to let you know this just in. Florida's Chief Financial Officer, Jimmy Patronis, is making his way to Bay County as we speak. So he will not be at today's opening of the legislative session. He will be traveling to Bay County. He is assessing that storm damage here in our area. And in case you didn't know, the CFO of Florida is also the state fire marshal. So Jimmy Patronis will be here in Bay County. He is on the way now to look at the storm damage. We also have current reports of outages, Jess, so we'll go ahead and share this. We'll start with FPL customers, Florida Power and Light. So I'm just going to go through the list in case you have family or friends in some of the other neighboring counties. Bay County, we have 3,955 people without power. That's out of 109,000 total customers. Again, nearly 4,000 people here in Bay County without power who are FPL customers. In our other immediate area, we have Holmes County, 71 customers without power. Jackson County, just 2, but this list will be updated throughout the day. I'm on FPL's website now.
Yeah, and some of those Jackson County customers are served by other entities, and we
Yes.
had reports of more than 10,000 out in Jackson County. Now, this was not the only area that was damaged in Jackson County, though, Mel. Of course, we have that Merritt Mill Pond damage
Yes.
coming in, but there's a subdivision, Indian Bluff subdivision. It's off 2301. There's also been a lot of damage in that area. We have some video that we're going to show you of that Indian Bluff subdivision from Jackson County. So if we could roll that footage, there you're seeing that on your screen. Again, that's the Indian Bluff subdivision off of 2301 up in Jackson County area. And of course, we've seen damage here in Bay County, on the east end of Bay County, the Thomas Drive area, near Schooners, and also in Panama City, we're seeing some damage. We've had some reporters coming in for that area. The Hathaway Bridge is closed.
Yes.
The West Bay Bridge is closed. Those are some temporary closures, but we don't know how long they're going to be closed at this time, but you can see those trees down there. Beck Avenue, 23rd, 15th Street, a lot of damage in those areas around FSU PC and Gulf Coast State College.
And speaking of Gulf Coast State College, they are closed today, so all campuses will be closed today. And you can just, again, see a lot of damage. Power lines being down, that's a big problem too, Jess. When I was out earlier between 6 to 7 this morning off Thomas Drive, you can just see, look at that image though,
Oh,
too,
my
of
goodness.
the car.
Yeah.
With a tree on it. Oh,
And that's in the
gosh.
Panama City area.
Wow.
So this was one of our reporters as he was trying to make his way to the station here. You can see all of that. Again, that's the Beck
damage.
Avenue, 23rd Street, 15th Street area. We're seeing damage in all of those locations. So this is really widespread damage. And it's very reminiscent of what we saw just 5 years ago with Hurricane Michael. Of course, this is in more isolated pockets than what we saw there. But it's really devastating. And we are also getting reports from emergency managers that there are some injuries out there.
And we don't know the extent just yet. We're working to find out more information, but our heart breaks for those who have been impacted by the storm system. And again, power outages, another issue we're looking at in Okaloosa County, Jess, we're looking at just over 6,700 customers without power out of 97,000 total. So this will be quite a process to restore power to those customers.
Yeah, it is going to be quite a process to clean this up. And as it becomes safer and safer for us to get out and about, we will go into these damaged areas. We've been very limited on what we can get at this time because we're trying to keep our crews safe as well. We're telling you not to get out on the roadways, so we can't allow our crews to do so until it's safe.
Yeah, that's right. When I was out earlier this morning with our morning producer, Abby, we had a brief amount of time between 6 to 7. We got what we needed and we got out of there quickly because that second storm system was coming through just as we were leaving.
And if you are traveling later today even, there's still going to be power lines down.
Yes.
So expect a lot of road closures, and you're not really going to get very far right now, especially with the Hathaway Bridge closed and the West Bay Bridge closed. So everyone just needs to stay put. And of course, the schools are closed across the area.
Yes.
Gulf Coast State College was originally going to have a delayed start, but they have now canceled classes at all of their campuses for today.
Yeah, so please stay safe, stay inside if you can, because those down power lines are going to be an issue. And debris. Debris was kind of strewn near the roadways. If the winds pick up, that could blow into the roadway. That could be a potential hazard if you're driving.
And you talked about Chief Financial Officer Jimmy
Yes.
Petronas coming down to survey the area. And Petronas is from this area.
Yes.
And so I know his heart is with us. And it's just going to be deja vu all over again, seeing all of this damage.
Yeah.
Now, we do want to check in with our meteorologists and see what's going on. So, guys, what are you seeing on the radar right now? What are our main threats at this hour?
Yeah, certainly still the gusty straight line winds are expected with this storm system. Now we've got a line of tornado warned cells that are actually stacking up with this system, but it's a squall line feature that's moving through, and each little kind of inflow notch that you see is potential where we've got some rotation happening in the atmosphere along this squall line feature, which might be capable of producing some tornadic activity. You look at storm reports that we've seen over the daytime here for today, and it certainly has been extensive and widespread, and quite a bit of tornadic activity has been reported as well, especially from Bay County, like you heard Jess and Mel talking about, even up all the way into Jackson County, that likely being the same cell, the same storm cell, the same tornado that started on the coastline and worked its way all the way up into Jackson County. Maybe there's even more reports where we don't have anything right now around Highway 231, northern Bay County. There's probably a little bit more damage even in those locations. There's this, what was a very strong tornado moved its way on through, likely to be an EF1, maybe an EF2 with just some of the samplings of the winds that we've got and some of the reports that we've heard of the storms moving their way on through in these locations here early on this morning. Then there's been also reports of tornadic activity, maybe even thunderstorm wind damage on South Walton as well as Okaloosa County near the 30A or Destin regions here this morning. As earlier we got this whole severe wave underway was about 4 a.m. when they started dealing with the first of what was a discrete supercell that produced the same almost about EF1 to EF2 force conditions. That one skipping along maybe on a path on a northeasterly direction as well. This one actually could be maybe one or two multiple cells that were able to produce that, though, that long form track that looks like a line from the coast on up through eastern Walton County